that is what happens when you grow up in an alcoholic or abusive household. Like, the only memories I have that I can pull from, they're all overshadowed by the bad memories. And I wish that I didn't. I wish I could remember some good things.
This is People I Know Show, a podcast about interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. I'm Curt Carstensen. This is episode number 47, and my guest today is Barbara Lee. Barbara is my cousin. She is my oldest cousin on my mom's side of the family. And as you might have noticed from that intro clip, in this conversation, Barbara opens up about some tough topics. First, we'll talk about the Minnesota State Fair. It recently ended. That was the previous time that I had seen her, as she has not long ago taken a job with Nordic Waffles, which had a pretty big presence at the fair. That job opportunity is one of many Barbara's had on the path through her career, which has caused her some big decisions at times, and we get deep into that topic. Then, into the personal growth segment, that's where Barbara begins to open up, and really 3 different times on 3 different big things from her life. I'll leave it at that for now. Take a look at the show notes for links to some things related to this episode. Now, let's get into my conversation with Barbara Lee. Episode 47 of People I Know Show. Curt Carstensen here with my cousin, Barbara Lee.
Hello, Curt.
Barbara, hello. This is a lake. The second time in a few episodes that I've been having a guest near a lake.
Is that why you chose me?
I suppose we can add it to one of the reasons that I chose you. But I thought that kind of worked okay last time. Get a little background. Where is this lake? Where are we right now?
We are in Kimball, Minnesota on Lake Carnelian. It's a very small lake, 150 acres. And we wanted a small lake. We wanted our own little kind of quiet area. So we got it.
We'll get into the real reason we're having this conversation. We're not here to talk about lakes. Although at some point, if you want to talk about the fact that you moved here a few years ago and this is a different life,
yeah,
the one that I have never experienced, you can. That's totally up to you.
Okay.
But what prompted this conversation today, Barbara, is, I guess, a conversation we had not long ago. I was at the Minnesota State Fair.
Yes.
It was day 4. I ran a 5K with much of my family. And you, for the first time, were working at the fair. And there's so much about the fair that I think as people that go to the fair, and it's a big thing in Minnesota. It's the second biggest fair in the country, I've learned. Second only to Texas, but Texas apparently goes for like 2 weeks longer.
It does. It goes much longer.
So it's the biggest fair per day, probably, is my guess. I don't know. We can check that later. I won't check that later. But you were a part of it for several of the days, working at a very busy place. Explain what led you into this.
Ooh, what led me into it? So in May, I took a job with Nordic Waffles. And what led me to that job is my former boss, Jeremy. I used to work with him at Caribou. He used to be my regional director at Caribou. And he had an opening. And he called me up one day and said, hey, would you even be interested in doing this? And I had absolutely loved working with him. And so it was just a fantastic opportunity. It's different because it is a startup company. And startup companies are very different than corporate America, I would say, in a variety of ways. But what Nordic Waffles is our company-owned business part of the operation is running the state fair. And so there's other elements that I do as well for my job, but the state fair is one of our biggest endeavors of the year. So then I worked at our cabin. We call it a cabin because in Norway, they have cabins with grass on the roof, and oftentimes you'll find a goat up there. And so this year we had our gnome up there, which is also very Norwegian. And yeah, I was a part of serving waffles to the masses for 6 of the 12 days I was there in person.
And as an outsider, I didn't really know this place that you're working. I saw you're like promoting it on Facebook and Instagram, or that you're going to be doing this, and you've gotten this different job. And I hadn't really given it a lot of thought until going to the fair. And one of the definite things I was going to do when going to the fair was, well, go see you, but also buy food from this Nordic Waffles place. And as I told you that day, I was kind of shocked at how well the logo stood out in a sea of logos and things to catch your attention. When I was looking, you told me where it was, and I was looking for it. And then when I saw it, I'm like, holy crap, this is really well done.
Legit, yeah.
And that just added to the fact that, okay, whatever you're doing, they're doing well. You're a part of it. You're helping it do well, I'm sure. And this is something that is kind of the real deal. So that was my first impression of it. And then I had, you can explain what it is, but a bunch of food inside of a waffle, and it was delicious. And I think I told you which one. It was the one top left of the menu. So explain like what you were, like what you're offering with this company, why it's special, and then I want to know about running a shop like that at the fair.
So what's unique about it is a Nordic waffle is crepe-like. It's thinner than a regular waffle, and it's a crepe-like sandwich that you fill with a variety of savory or sweet ingredients. So like the Al Pastor was new this year for us at the fair, or a Pebbles and Bam Bam was also a new one. I think that's the one you had, if I remember correct. You had the Al Pastor. Okay. So then so the Al Pastor is marinated pork and pineapple and cilantro, and it's all inside of a crepe-like foldable sandwich-style waffle.
It makes no sense, but
you're like, whoa! But it's
delicious,
so go to NordicWaffles.com, I suppose, and check out our website and get some visual images, or who knows, we could put a link, I suppose, or something. But what's unique about it then is that we had 8 different varieties that we offered at the fair: 4 sweet, 4 savory, and this premise came to us from our founder, Stina. She came from Norway, where she did this over there. And she's a true entrepreneur. And so she came to America and really wanted to bring us her version of Nordic waffles and revolutionize like how we thought of this food. And she had an incredibly successful business in Norway. She was known literally as the waffle queen. And she sold her business there and came to us.
And now you're a part of that. And I want to talk more about, what led up to you taking on that job, because I think your career path of the people that I know and the people in my family and extended family, to me, I find it pretty interesting. So I want to talk about that. The fair, though.
Yeah.
Let's say fair. Yeah. 12 days of just craziness.
Yes.
I don't know if you know the exact or the number they say, the admission for the fair. I know on given days it's 120, 30, 40, 50,000, probably close to 200,000 on the biggest days. I don't know. It's just, it's a wild place to be. I go once a year lately because I run in this 5K, and that's kind of enough for me.
Sure.
But some people, it is like the biggest thing of the year.
Oh.
So what's it like being in the middle of it and operating in a way to make sure people like your product and come back?
Yeah. I mean, that's very hard to do, to be efficient, I think, and to get that number of volume of people through your line very quickly so that you don't have a long line, so that your line, even if it's long, moves very, very quickly and you can serve many more people. And so it was really fun to be a part of that. There's a lot of planning that goes into the fair that I just came, a part of in May when I began with this company. So they had done it last year for the first time. This was the second year being at the fair. And so there is an incredible amount of preparation and planning that go into it. Hiring all of the employees, all of the amount of product that you need to, the amount of food that you go through in an hour versus a day is an incredible amount of food. And so, but I love that environment. I used to work for Caribou, as you know, and I survived many a Black Friday. So I guess for me, it's like Black Friday for 12 straight days. And so I worked 6 of those days, and I really like being in the thick of it. I liked being in the cabin, working with the kids and the people. There's about 20 of us in there at any one point, doing a variety of things leading to people getting their Nordic waffle. And we would sing at the top of our lungs, like Sweet Caroline or whatever was on the radio or whatever we were, tuning into. And then people were just like getting their waffles like this. So it was incredible.
Do you have any favorite stories of interactions with either the individuals working on your staff or the customers that are really representative of the fact that you were at the fair and being a part of this?
What I love about the fair is we could probably have a whole nother podcast just about fairs. But what I love is the people and the energy of the customers. Like we'd have customers come up and be like, you were my first stop. I couldn't wait to check out Nordic Waffles. Thank you for being here. And we're like, oh my gosh, thank you for being here. Thank you for coming. And they were just so excited to try it. And that energy totally fills me up and gives me energy. And I love the chaos that it is.
So assuming everything goes well and you're back there next year, what's like a lesson you'd learn that going into it next year that, okay, now that I understand this, and you could either, the same thing you would tell some other shop or restaurant going in or take it back to your own. What did you really feel like, I had no idea this happens?
I didn't know any of what happened. I literally didn't. I had just no concept. I had no frame of reference for anything that we did. So I think there's a download of things that I've learned. I think one of the key takeaways is just speed of service, to execute at a high level and to execute fast. And to do it well, to deliver a really impressive product. How do we get better at that? And we have an incredible staff of the people that we hired that joined us for the fair. These are people who can be on their feet 14 hours a day. That's who you look for. You look for people who have energy even when there's no energy left within them, and who can just keep going and bring it every single time. And we had that. We were clicking on all of those cylinders.
And you need that for the fair, for the people that are working there that long. But I'm finding with some of my experiences in life, those are the people that you really want to hire for any job that interacts with the public. You need people that have energy, that are going to be happy to serve somebody. Like this is fun to interact with this other person.
Absolutely.
And I find that sometimes there's people that are in those jobs aren't that, and maybe they don't realize that that's important.
Yeah.
But it is important.
We have kids. I mean, they're 14, 15, 16 years old. You can say what you want about millennials, but they're not all slackers, if that's a term that you've applied to some millennials or teenagers nowadays. What are we going to do with those kids? These are incredibly hardworking, standing, no line, no waiting. We can serve you over here at Nordic Waffles. I'm like, look at you guys go. I love that. We're shifting the paradigm of who people think kids are. I think that's so important. And there are a lot of really amazing people who can work in that kind of environment, and they will go far. They will go far. If they can work that state fair environment, they will do very well.
And I think it's important at a younger age like that to have an experience like that. We both grew up on farms, and whether or not we always liked working hard on the farm, and I have an impression you probably even worked harder than me. You were oldest child and I was youngest, and there's a lot of work to do. I think that just having some of those really hardworking days teaches you that sometimes you got to do this, and life isn't always easy, and you got to work hard. I don't always like to do that. I don't really want to work that hard all the time, but I know I'm capable of it.
Yeah.
Because I did.
Because we did. Yes. Absolutely. I got to get a different job and, leave. And my younger brother and sister had to do work then because I left. But it's incredibly hard work. But I think it prepares you for life.
So one other note on the fair that I think is, I'm here at your home today. It's the second time I've been here. You've lived here how long?
It's been just over 2 years.
It's over 2 years. For your oldest daughter's graduation party from high school, I was here.
Yes.
And you're, an hour? It was an hour and 20-minute drive from my house today.
Yeah.
Not so far that I couldn't come here, but with everything going on, the podcast brings us together today. But at the fair, your husband, Mark, was there also, happened to be working at Nordic Waffles that day.
He may have been voluntold.
Okay.
To be there, but I think he actually had a lot of fun.
So he was there, and then I saw you when you kind of took a break and relaxed for a while and talked, and then you felt like, okay, it's time to get back to work.
Yeah.
But you didn't suggest that Mark needed to get back to work right away.
No.
So I got to hang out with him one-on-one, maybe the first time in my life, at least for that amount of time.
Yeah.
We just talked for a while and walked around the fair. And I find whether it's something like this or whatever situations I put myself in, it's so important to spend some one-on-one time with people that you think you know, but maybe you don't. I've known him forever because you've been married to him for
23 years.
23 years, and I probably met him a year or two before that.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
But
we played baseball in your cornfield.
Yeah, we did. Well, there's a lot of things going way back. I just thought, wait, you know what? I've never done this with Mark before, and this is fun. We just got to hang out.
He loves sports, so you and he, definitely have that in common.
Yeah. So just a couple thoughts from what I'm learning about the podcast 47 episodes in is find whatever it is. This is a way for me to find reasons to like engage with people one-on-one. There's other ways to do it that I find so rewarding and valuable. And so that was a cool thing. And then out of all of that comes this conversation. And I think the next thing that helps explain your story is like you mentioned Caribou Coffee, which at some point was just, I think, a small Minnesota company. And now it's like all over the place. And you had a part of putting it all over the place. That and several other things that you've been doing over the last, I guess, your adult working life, just kind of explain what leads up to you jumping at this opportunity with this company and being willing to do that so many years into your career. Yeah,
I think it's very interesting. So, I was the first kid on either side of the family. I was the oldest grandchild on both sides of the family. So I was the first grandchild, first kid to ever go to a 4-year college. I found that like there's an incredible amount of responsibility I felt in that. I felt like maybe I was paving a way for someone who didn't think that would be an option for them. And so I got a degree in hotel restaurant administration, and I've been blessed to work in that field my entire career in some way, shape, or form. So I started right out of college as a director of catering at a 4-star hotel. That was an amazing privilege that I guess sometimes I wonder still, like, how did I get that job? It could be a whole nother story. And then I chose to stay home with my daughters. I might get into a little bit of more of that later of why, but I chose to stay home and leave my career as a catering director, I guess, a really great job, to just run a daycare. Just run a daycare, right?
How many kids did you have at the most at your daycare?
12 would be the most. 12.
In-home daycare. You got to raise your daughters until they went to school.
Yes, until they went to school.
But you also had to help raise.
Yeah, I mean, I needed to have an income. Yeah. And so, that's hard for me now looking back. There were, women don't always treat each other very nicely. I'm afraid to say, as a woman, I don't think we support each other the way that we need to. I had people say to me when I started looking for a job, like I was going to transition out of daycare and look for a job, right? I was applying or thinking about applying for jobs, and someone said, well, what does she think she's going to do anyway? I mean, she's just a daycare provider after all. I was like, really? Wow, interesting. But anyway, what I did is I literally sat down on a note card and I said, you're supposed to do something that you love, and then it won't feel like work. And so what do I love? And I was like sitting there tapping my pen, and I wrote down Caribou. I wrote down the word. I'm like, I absolutely love Caribou. I go there all the time. I have dates with my daughters at Caribou. And I applied, and I got hired as a manager at Caribou. And I was really fortunate. I feel in my career path, I was promoted to a really high volume store, they would call it, a drive-through store. Then I was promoted to being a training manager with them, and I trained people from our region. And then I got the incredible opportunity to work in the franchise and license portion of the business. So franchising stores, opening up stores, traveling all around the United States, opening up different Caribous, like inside of, say, a grocery store, like a Coburn's, perhaps, that people around here would relate to, or inside of a an airport or inside of a university. And so I did, my Caribou career was about 10 years total. And then things changed for that company, and the amount of travel that I was going to be required to do increased. And I already traveled 7 out of every 10 days. And so I really didn't want to travel 9 or 10 out of every 10 days. My family was really great about how much I traveled, but I decided to look for something else. And I was blessed with an incredible opportunity to work where my husband works at Burnix, which is a franchisee of Pepsi. And so I worked there for 2 years.
Can I stop you here?
Yeah.
We'll get back to that.
Okay.
But
okay.
we're going from one thing to the next, and you got out of the daycare thing.
I did. Mm-hmm.
And then you had this job that you liked and loved in
I
certain
loved
ways.
my
And
job.
then you were forced to be gone so much, where it kind of was the opposite. You had this daycare to be close to home
Be
to the
careful
girls.
what you wish for.
And then it swung, the pendulum swung the other way completely.
It totally swung the other way.
And then you're like gone all the time.
I
So
was.
what's the point of having this job if you can't be with your family?
Yeah.
So then, okay, it's time to get out of that. So you're kind of swinging back and forth, trying to find
that
what
balance
you want in that point in your life.
Exactly. So I accept an incredible job at Burnix as a food service manager, overseeing like Duluth, St. Cloud, Dresser, Wisconsin markets. And I really liked that job. I didn't travel very much at all anymore. I traveled once or twice a month, but not very much at all. I also found, though, that so many great things about Burnix. I love everything about Burnix. I don't think I'm built to sit behind a desk 10 hours a day. I'm just not. So if you look at my career path as a director of catering, I'm on my feet all day. I'm moving. As a daycare provider, certainly not sitting down. As a Caribou manager, definitely behind the counter working, traveling to all these different places, opening up stores. I'm on the go all the time. So I talk about the pendulum swing. Now I'm sitting behind a desk 10 hours a day for the most part. 80% of my time would probably be behind a desk. And so I felt like there was like, why do I feel like there's something missing? This is a great job. I don't know. And then one day, my former boss from Caribou, Jeremy, who I just absolutely, like the best leader that I have ever worked for, calls me up and has an opportunity. Would I come work for him again at Nordic Waffles? It took me, because of how much I didn't enjoy working for him because I got, it was just easy. He requires a lot from you, but you always know where you stand with him. You can trust him. He knows that I value family as my highest priority. Therefore, he values my family, and he prioritizes me by prioritizing my family. So when he said, do you want to come back and work for me? It took about the bat of an eyelash to say, yeah, I'll do it. Which was kind of scary in a sense that, like, I have a really good job, right? I have a really great place that I work. Should I be changing right now? A startup company is very different than a lot of companies to work for. So, but I think some of the things that have happened in my life have led me to believe. So Mark, as you mentioned him, he's very much like, so what if it doesn't work out? What if this? What if that? What about this? I'm like, it'll all work out. It's fine. Why not? Let's go for it. And he's like, oh. But of course, the one thing is he really liked my former boss as well, and still does. He really likes Jeremy, and he really trusts him and knows that I enjoyed working for him. So because of that, Mark was able to sign off. Not like Mark would probably be the first one to say he doesn't really get to tell me what to do, but his opinion is very important to me.
Are you understating that?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It takes a strong man to support a fiery, independent woman. So I have got a very strong man at my side.
As you're explaining this journey through your career, a couple things come to my mind is one thing we didn't touch on, my siblings who have both been on the podcast,
Yes.
Chuck in episode 2, Michelle in episode, what was that, 18 or 19. They're a real estate team, and they've added people over recent years. And for a while, I don't know how long it was, you were a part of it, but now you're not. And I think it wouldn't be proper for me to not ask you about that. So what happened? I don't know at all.
I really love real estate. I did get into business with your brother and sister. It was fantastic. It's a passion of mine. I think I'd like to keep my real estate license. I still have it. I did real estate, I suppose. It was a short stint, Curt. It was probably about 6 months of actually really doing it. I sold, I think, 3 or 4 houses. Now I'm already not remembering. The reason I stepped away from it is I underestimated the amount of time it took to really get started in that business while working full time. If there's anyone out there who thinks that I can do a lot. I hit my limit with working, a 50 plus hour a week job and doing that on the side. And it really started to affect my family, even though they were very supportive of me doing whatever the whim is that Mom, Barbara, my wife, wants to do. It literally came to the point, like, why did we decide to move here to this beautiful place if you are never home? Which is kind of the reason I stopped traveling, right? So it was sort of an eye-opener.
When will you learn, Barbara?
I don't know. I do swing the pendulum because I want to try different things. And I guess I'm just not afraid to try different things. I don't really care what other people think of what I do. I don't need their permission. And so the only thing that's difficult is, I think, obviously Chuck and Michelle are very gracious and understanding. But, I feel bad that I kind of like went in and went out of that business. What they do every day is incredible. They are incredible people. And I could not keep up. I could not keep up with doing 2 things. So I think if I could ever just do real estate one day and I could support myself financially, I really had intended to get there. I could not build it up fast enough to be able to support myself and just do that. So that's the reason.
Fair enough. And I think then that leads me perfectly into the other thought I had was through these different things you've done and these big decisions you've had, like first, I don't know how long it goes from eating away at you before you talk to Mark and then talk to the girls, however that flows in your family.
Yeah.
What have you learned about responding to these inner feelings and thoughts of what am I doing? What can I change? Should I change? Because I find for myself, and I imagine for others, it's our ability to deal with those big decisions, how quickly we can get to a point where we might actually do something differently is one thing. And our willingness to do something else, if it should come to that, kind of that the life trajectory of people goes in all sorts of ways because of dealing with these big job and career decisions. And what can you share that you think, if you can boil it down to 1 or 2 things, what was the most valuable lesson you learned from having this happen to you and then you responding?
To like all the different things I've chose to do?
Yeah. These big decisions that you've made.
Big decisions.
And how did you?
So I process it a lot. It's not, it might seem as though like I jump right in and I go for it. It takes a lot of talking to my family. I talk to my family. I talk to my friends. I'm a very visual learner. I'm very expressive. I talk through things at latem. Like my friends probably get very tired of me because I try to be like, well, what about this? What about this? Also, it seems like I was in real estate for a short stint, but I mean, it was 6 months of studying and preparing before. So it was like a year of being in it, even though I wasn't in it, for like doing it actively for a year. I think I'm not like, one of the great things about me is I'm not scared to try anything different. Of course, that can be to my own demise sometimes, right? Because then it's like, there was just one thing that didn't work out exactly the way I thought it would. So I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry that I tried those things. I'm happy that I did. I've learned so much from so many different things that I've done. Some of them for 3 to 4 years, some of them for 6 months, some of them for 10 years. I wouldn't change any of it. And I wouldn't let the fact that one thing didn't work out quite the way I thought it might deter me from ever trying something new again, because you learn every step of the way. And what I found is I'm an avid reader. I'm a constant learner. I love learning. And so I say, the only thing I could do differently is nothing. Nothing.
Because there's always something to learn by doing something different.
Absolutely. And I will never stop being that person who, so I worked in one career for 10 years. I have zero problem staying put. I'd love to stay put. But if change is required, sign me up. I'm not going to be afraid of it. And maybe I used to be, but I'm not as much anymore. Because I get to the point where I'm going to be 45. Can I do this now? Can I redefine who I am? Well, I guess we'll see.
And that goes right back into my most recent episode with Philip. That I hadn't really thought about that much lately, but yeah, the way he described just this, we can at any age just do something totally different.
Absolutely.
And I think for some people, whether it's a relationship or a friendship or a job or anything that you've started and you feel like, well, if I don't continue this, all of this is wasted in some way. I think people, we have an attachment to things of the past as if we need to carry it forward, even with our stuff. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Walking through your house, I didn't notice a lot of clutter or stuff.
No,
but,
there's a reason for that.
Okay. That we hold on to things we need them because we used to have them with the time.
I know.
We probably don't at all, but that's a human psychological thing that I think a lot of us struggle with in certain aspects of life.
Right.
If I stop this now, what was all that for or something?
Yeah. Or who am I letting down? For me, it is if I don't do this, if I stop doing that, I'm letting someone down. I don't like to let people down. That's very difficult for me. So, but I would say don't let it stop you from taking the path less traveled. Mark has been in the same career, in the same job for 21 years. So sometimes you wonder, should have I done something else? It's good. I like it. But you keep doing different things and it seems to work for you. Should everyone do that? No, not everyone should. But also don't be scared to.
And all of our thought processes are different. And I'd imagine if I could just see inside of someone else's head and try to understand what they're thinking about, where someone's at a job for 21 years and someone else not nearly. And I guess you're married and you went to the same thing, but you have different jobs and different situations. But I think we all some of us, I think some people like the stability and are content with having something that's stable and that they can enjoy.
Don't like change.
And change is risky. And I don't suggest everyone changes all the time, but change shouldn't be something that is not an option in any aspect of life.
Well, and the only other thing I'll say about it is that I feel really important that I teach my daughters as teenage girls, I define different things for them that is uncharacteristic of what a quote unquote mom or woman, what they think, how they label that. I want them to see me doing different things and not being scared of that. That is what I want for them. So I push myself harder to do things that sometimes I'm scared of. I signed up for a triathlon. I didn't know how to swim. I did that for my daughters. I wanted them to see hey, this isn't going to stop me from just doing it.
And putting it on the calendar finally gave you a real reason to learn how to swim.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it was never something you had to do. But
no, I could go in the water and not drown, but I sure couldn't swim in a race. And I did. So when I think about the things that I choose to do, we have family meetings. We talk about things. And ultimately, I'm 10 years from now, will you regret if you don't do this? And so if I say 10 years from now, I'd regret that I didn't do this, then I just do it. I don't want any regrets.
Yes, living life with regrets. I don't think I have many or any, really, the way I look at my life now. But I know people do. And I wish for them that they wouldn't, because then you're really attached to the past in ways that serve you little to no purpose, or perhaps to your current and future detriment. I'm afraid of that people are really struggling with that. I don't know that I am, but I don't want anyone to. So if there's any way for them to get out of that, I'd be happy to.
Well, at least define with an asterisk that regrets that you have the choice in making. I mean, I think everyone has regrets. I have a lot of regrets in my life, but none of them are regrets that I had the choice to do something and I didn't do it. There's a difference.
Barbara, now let's move on to the personal growth segment. I have this segment now. We're working on about 20 plus episodes where I officially added this. It's in not the show title, but how I describe the show: interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. And I think it's important for me. I've grown in ways. I want to know other people are growing, and I hope the conversations help those people, those individuals that consume this podcast and whatever else they're doing, look for ways to improve yourself. That's important to me. And now this is the opportunity for you to add or share whatever you think is important about your growth.
I feel like I work on things from my past a lot. That's the area that I need the most growth with. As an avid listener to your podcast, Curt, I want to share a story about something, and it is hard for me to share, but it kind of ties into some different things about how I was wrong and some different things. So, growing up, like, we went to church, probably like a lot of people did, in a Catholic church. Years later, I did find out that the priest who served in our parish actually did abuse some people, a friend of ours. I always had this kind of like weird feeling, I guess, that's the only way I can describe it, is like a weird feeling. But other than that, so faith wasn't something, this is kind of a faith story, I guess, but faith wasn't, like, I didn't go to church every day. Mark and I got married. We're going to have our first child. We have Taylor. But what happened at her birth was a very defining moment in my life. And so I'm going to share that with you because, like I said, I've listened to your podcast, and so I want to bring an element of something different.
We're about 10 to 1 non-believers to believers when expressing in the conversation. This is good. So,
and that's why I want to go back to, like, I wasn't a devout, like, I went to church every day. I wasn't, that was not me. But what happened is, as we were in labor with Taylor, as I was in labor with Taylor, the umbilical cord became wrapped around her neck in utero, as she was crowning, as she was going through the birth canal. So all of a sudden they say to me, I hear people saying the heart rate is dropping, the baby is in distress. Like, they're talking about in the background, do we need to have an emergency C-section? What do we do? I need the forceps. And like, all these things are happening simultaneously. And they're like, we need you, Mom, to push right now. We need to get this baby out. The baby's in distress. So, we do all of that, and you're relieved for 2 seconds because they take the baby and you see a baby, and immediately everything goes crazy in the hospital room. Everything went awful. There was some button pushed on the wall, and immediately like 12 people enter the room. And I'm hearing things like not breathing, heart rate down, heart rate is this, blood pressure is this, blood pressure is dropping, baby, I need oxygen, get me oxygen. I start freaking out. I hear them say to me, keep her calm. We're doing everything we can, ma'am. The worst thing I've ever heard in my life. We're doing everything we can. It continues. They're like, it's a girl. I'm like, she's a girl. What is her name? Well, if she's a girl, her name is Taylor. Come on, Taylor, I need you to fight. They're like, someone says, like, if you believe in God, I would pray now. I had asked God for help a lot of times in my life. I didn't know if I believed in him or if I just went to church because I grew up going to church sometimes. I had no idea. And that's what I think is important for you to hear, because like what happened next is a really defining moment in my life. And so I said, dear God, you just gave me this baby. You just gave her to me. Please, I will do anything. If you let her live, if you let me be her mom, I will change everything to show you that I'll be a good mom. And I was like, she's a girl. So I just started praying out loud, Hail Mary, full of grace, blessed art thou among women. And they're like, I've got a faint heartbeat. Okay, I think she's coming back. Blood pressure is rising. Okay, she's starting to take her first breath. For 3 minutes, Taylor did not breathe on her own. Afterwards, they were worried about brain damage. They warned us that there could be consequences to going without breathing for that long, even though she was put on oxygen, because they didn't know exactly how long she was in distress in utero with that umbilical cord wrapped around her neck because she got stuck. God answered the most important prayer for me that day. My faith is a huge part of who I am. I don't always find it, though, in the four walls of a church, because it's hard for me to find it in the four walls of a church all the time. I've been involved in church, and I haven't been. Talk about a pendulum swing. But what happened that day, I chose then to quit my job. After about 6 or 8 months, I chose to quit my job at the Radisson, where I worked as a catering director, and I decided to be a daycare provider because I wanted to be home with my children, and it was my way of keeping true to my promise that I would do whatever I needed to do to make sure that being a mom was the most important thing to me, and still is, regardless of anything that I've done in between. So, yeah.
Well, this is going back, how old? Like she's what, 20?
19.
19. So I'm sure at that time I got the whatever version as a 16-year-old of that story that something happened. But I'd long since forgotten. Everything seemed fine from my perspective.
You know, and I think, too, a lot of people are like, oh, that happens all the time. I have no idea how incredibly difficult that time in our life was. I went through postpartum depression.
So you didn't know for how long that she didn't have...
No.
Like there might be issues that would have come up
later.
From that.
Yeah.
And maybe there was in small ways that aren't that bad.
Right.
But
maybe.
Whatever happened in those 3 minutes.
Then we weren't sure. You know, they assign an APGAR score to babies when they're born on a scale of 0 to 10. And 10 is the best. And if you score like a 6, that means you're pinkish in color and you're breathing and you're, like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is all really pretty solidly good numbers. Taylor was a 2. She's blue. She wasn't breathing on her own. I mean, it was about as bad as it could get. And yeah, so for a while, Mark and I weren't sure. But of course, today we have an amazingly beautiful 19-year-old young lady who's incredibly smart and has a heart of gold. And I think I learned in that moment that she was truly God's child, and he's lent her to me.
So that I'll leave this be an opportunity for you, for the people that have taken in my podcast, knowing that a lot of people that have influenced me are the people that have made me be okay with not believing. So you observing and taking in those conversations and this experience in your life is totally different. I guess bring something back to me based on that you'd like to like pose a question to me or whatever you have for representing the people that I realize this. There's people listening to my podcast when I have atheists on and people that are not like their beliefs that really relate to me and are important, that they've come to my life. What are you sitting back and thinking when I'm doing this?
Well, I'm listening to them, and their frame of reference is just that. It is their frame of reference, just as mine. And you know, some of these people you've had on your podcast would say like that is circumstantial. Like those two things aren't related. One thing happened, you prayed and something happened that was going to happen anyway. And you somehow tied those two things together in an emotional way.
The causation, correlation.
Yeah. Yep.
So definitely those things two correlate. You prayed and the most amazing, important thing that you need to have happen in your life happened.
And I guess the full circle thing is I wasn't always that devout of a believer. I wasn't always, you know, I guess that's the part where I think that you have to understand, like, God had no reason to answer my prayer that day because I was like this great church going type person, if that's what atheists think like happens to Christians or whatever. And I don't think they think of it in that way, but convince me how what I experienced that day then isn't a correlation.
Yeah, okay, so the way someone arguing on this, they would call yours, yes, a correlation, while you are experiencing it as a causation.
Oh, okay. So
your prayer to God is the reason that the positive result
causation.
came.
Yes. Okay.
So here's just a brief thing from, so I'm still an outsider here. I have no emotional connection to that. You clearly do. Taylor, she should, but doesn't in a way because she wouldn't remember it. I mean, she
does
knows it
through
happened,
my story.
Through your story.
Yeah.
I guess I can't speak for her. So just as an opposite of that, I don't know specific things like that have gone the other way. But I remember one of the first atheist meetup things I went to, there was a guy, I've never seen him since. I don't think I've really been back to that group for just other reasons. And he was like the rare person I've met on this journey that was a believer, prayed to God, probably comparably to what you did in a very defining moment for his like 2-year-old who died.
Yeah.
And if his biggest, most important prayer of his life wasn't answered,
I know,
he was done with it.
And you know, so the only thing that I can say is like, I understand how you could turn away from your faith in that moment. I do. I truly, though, believe, like I said, she is God's child and she was given to me. I think God cried along with that gentleman when he lost his son. I feel like the book was written for what was supposed to happen, and the destiny in all of our lives is planned out, and we're just taking the steps and living it. And you know, the thing is I'm not a great philosophical arguer. I am not. I'm just a mom, and I grieve with your story about your friend who lost his this person know who lost his 2-year-old. I think the most horrific things that happen in our lives happen to the ones we love. And because of that, that's our frame of reference. That's his frame of reference. Mine is different. And I just want people to know, like, I guess the only thing I'll say is that if you're looking for good or if you're looking for bad, you will find it. I'm just choosing to look for the good. I'm choosing to hold on to anything I can, hope, belief, faith, because I think the opposite is too much of a burden to carry. So I choose to look for the good.
And I recognize that perspective, that for all sorts of reasons, things that I don't have like emotional connections to, like I don't have anything emotionally connecting me to believe. So at a certain point, I stop believing. Not that what I think has anything to do with what you should do, but hearing your story, I don't expect you to or suggest you to stop believing. It's like,
and I know
one of the most emotional, important things in your life, whether it's reality or whatever it felt like, what you felt that day is
real.
Far stronger than any belief could ever really do anything for you. So I understand, and by no means am I certain that I am right.
Yeah.
And then
I like about you.
I just hope that someone with the other perspective could say those same words.
Yes.
Like you experience this in a way that maybe is larger than anything else you've ever been through.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Right up there. So that kind of dictates the way you will carry on with your relationship to that moment in your beliefs.
Yeah.
And I don't.
So it's just another sprinkling of a different perspective that I just want someone to know that there is hope. I've had a lot of unanswered prayers too. I believe that there's reasons for that. I like the song, about, thank God for unanswered prayers. I'm really, I think that's true. I think sometimes we pray for things and it's not meant to be, but at that time we think it's the most important thing. But when it comes to a life of a child, like, I wish I had an answer for why. Like that's the worst grief anyone could endure.
I just know that there's a world of people with some very similar, but some greatly different perspective with their children that go through the same process of trying to understand, and people do it whatever way they do it. And I'm cool with what everyone does individually. Yeah. Believe or don't believe. We all get that opportunity to take that however we want. Yeah. A big thing for people on my side of this argument is when people on the other side of the argument try to put this whatever they believe into legislation, and then it gets into political there, but their beliefs are so right and so important that
everyone should believe that way,
even though there's there's no basis to necessarily believe their beliefs. The word belief and faith are these kind of grabbing at nothing certain, but yet this nothing certain gets to go into law because we decide it does.
Yeah, it's intangible for sure.
On my side, it's okay, here's what we can, best of our human capabilities, prove to be true. Let's live by that and do the best with that we can. Yeah. And I think so often people don't have a conversation where they can understand the other perspective. Yeah. Again, I don't know that mine is certainly right. I'm confident that it's right. Doesn't make me right. A lot of people are confident in a lot of things that are not right. That's the point of this podcast.
You should be confident in your own belief.
You should be, but you should
But I also recognize that other people have a different frame of reference than me. And I don't want to push on my belief onto anyone else. But I also want them to know that sometimes there are undefinable moments that happen that can be miraculous. And there isn't also an explanation for why. People could say doctors worked on her and did all the things they needed to do. I say God breathed life into her. It's my frame of reference. It's what I get to. I mean,
you get to.
I get to because I'm her mom.
I can't say with certainty that it's not correct, even though in my understanding, I would just explain it differently.
Yes, sure. And that's okay.
Okay, so that's a powerful moment from your life. Still in the personal growth segment. Tell me, where do we go from there?
So the other part of what I really work on, and this is the biggest part of it, I wanted to share that faith story with you specifically because of your podcast and your listeners, but I do work on my past a lot. I grew up in a home with an abusive alcoholic father. That has changed my frame of reference in a lot of ways. Alcoholism is a monster, and it changes who you are. It shaped my childhood. Everyone who knows me will say I'm overly emotional and I wear my heart on my sleeve. And I think some people could deal with some of the things that perhaps happened maybe more strongly than I could. I'm very emotionally charged. And so how I work on me is by working on that little girl who went through those things and trying to make her more confident. And it's weird, but I have to work on those things to get better because it's the one demon that I still struggle with, that I can't always make sense of, even though I think it's, I'm at a place in my life where I have forgiven. I didn't always feel that way because like alcoholism, it's a horrible, horrible, horrible disease. And so, my dad struggled with that and then would become abusive to us when he would get drunk. And then it would just exasperate itself and it manifests in different ways, like a gambling addiction, I believe he probably had. We grew up on a farm, and so I think there's always a need for money. So I think there's a justification about like going to a casino and trying to win something but then you could feel like a really important person, perhaps. Maybe people were bringing you drinks. I don't know. And you could feel like you were in control of something. And so I think growing up like that, and now being a mom and looking back at that it's really difficult. And so I have to work on that all the time. Because like, and I think the hard part for me is, and I think there was a therapist once who told me this, that the physical wounds of being hit will heal. I didn't ever suffer a broken bone or anything like that, but I would get hit quite a bit. I was sort of fiery and independent even then. And so like when my dad was drinking a lot and when he would get abusive, he would kind of go blank in the eyes. Like that's the only thing I can say. Like it was completely cold, black. Like there was nothing there. And I would, in trying to control any part of it I could, would be like, I would recognize that he was going to hit me. And so instead of letting it just happen, I would be like, go ahead. Like I would hit me. And that would infuriate him a lot. Sometimes he would still hit me. And sometimes he would just get so mad that I knew he was going to hit me that he didn't. I guess I was willing to take my chances. But he didn't like that. And so like sometimes if I would have kept my mouth shut, I probably wouldn't have gotten as much trouble. But I also think like I wasn't getting in trouble. Like I was getting hit because he was drunk.
Were you, not that anything justifies it, but is there any possible justification and like, I guess what would anything prompt it other than dad being drunk? Like anything you've done that would deserve some discipline, just not to that extent.
The thing is I suppose, so sure, but I don't know what those things were because alcoholism is such a beast that it comes out of nowhere. Like 1 minute, everything is fine. And then the next minute, it's like a flip of a switch. Something has set off the monster within him. No one knew when it was happening, why it was happening. I think it was stress related. I think there would be some little thing that would happen that on a normal day, it would still just be a little thing. And then in that moment, it would cause everything to unravel. And so as a mom myself, I no, I don't think so, but I'm sure there was something, so, yeah. So, that's a good question because there was this one time and it was probably my fault. So, and that's the hard part of this whole thing. Like I work on this all the time because it's like,
you deserve discipline, but not that kind of discipline.
Right. Yeah.
Or you not deserve, like discipline's not unreasonable.
Right. Exactly. So then it's like my fault. Right. But there was this one time where you go to bed and everything was fine, but then you'd wake up and I think in between there was probably like a drinking binge at a casino somewhere, and he'd come home just in time to like milk the cows or something. And so he's probably tired, exhausted, drunk, like all of these things. And then you get kicked by a cow, and that would probably send you off the deep end, because like who wants that to happen? But I remember he came in the house, and my mom, we'd always get these looks like, shut up, don't say anything. And I grabbed out of a cereal bowl on our kitchen table a couple of cough drops because I had a cold. And that was what set him off. Why are you taking those? What is, you don't need those. And so this is the part where it's my fault. Like, I flippantly toss the cough drops back into the bowl. I turned to walk away, and a cold syrup bottle, like of Robitussin, like a cough syrup bottle, he just grabbed it and he wailed it at my head. I honestly don't I don't remember. I think it hit me. I don't know how hard, but then what happened is like it crashed on the wall behind me, and like there's bloody looking cough syrup everywhere that I slip and fall down in, and I get kicked in the gut a couple of times. And it's like, why did you make me do that? Like, that was my fault. And I had to go to school. So like staying home is not a good idea that day, or any day for me, ever. So when you say, like, was there anything that you ever did to provoke it? Yeah. Those things when I would get defiant, when I would try to stand up for myself, or just be a teenage girl throwing cough drops back into a bowl in a manner in which I shouldn't have. But I know that the real problem was the alcohol. I do know that. But so what I was saying is, like, a therapist once told me, like, the physical will heal. The hardest part is to get the mental recording of all those things that you were told to go away. That I struggle with every day. Even though, like, look at I'm living my best life. I have 2 amazing daughters. I have, like, the husband of my dreams. I live in this beautiful place, and yet I can't even talk about it and, like, keep my composure. The only thing, so that my dad ended up really in a bad place, and he ended up in prison. I feel guilty to this day because I felt a real sense of relief when that happened, because I felt safe for the first time in a really long time. And I was married then. But that was the first time I really felt safe. But then I felt guilty about having that feeling. Mm-hmm. And then dealing with that is hard. But what I will say is, once he got out of prison, he has made steps to, like, he does not drink anymore. He is sober. He is living a good life, in the sense that, like, he did not allow all of those things to continue to define him. He did not go back to drinking. Thank goodness. So I think there's an element of redemption in there. So, like, I guess the reason I'm sharing this is because, like, some people have said to me, like, oh, you look like you have it all together. oh my God, like I am the least from altogether of anyone I know. And I share it because of that. And because if you know someone who is struggling with alcoholism, there is hope. Like, he was able to change his life. And I forgive him because two things, I guess. The burden of not forgiving him was much harder for me. It took me a long time. When our grandpa died, I realized that holding my father at arm's length because of the sins of his past was not doing me any good. But that hasn't been that long. So you can tell, like, I've really struggled with this for a long time. But life is too short to continue to have him suffer again and again and again. And so I had said I forgave him for a long time. I said those words, but I think for me, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I kept waiting for something bad to happen. I kept waiting, like, is he going to go back to drinking? I was scared of that. And so I think that kept me from fully, like, in my heart, trusting. So I can forgive people, but I'm really big on trust. And I couldn't trust him. But now I do. And so, but that's been a long journey that is still very difficult for me to this day, that I'll continue to work on.
Thank you for sharing that, Barbara. There's a lot of layers to this that I think I want to get to kind of briefly for most of them and move on, but I think they need to be stated. One is like the fact that you're talking about your dad. I'm not just some guy that doesn't know you having a podcast. That's my uncle, my mom's brother. And again, I didn't experience this the way you did.
Right.
But
yeah,
I lived through this from not really knowing and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a few brief instances, I kind of saw the culmination of what could be close to these really bad moments. But I still, again, with your birth of your oldest daughter and with this, I don't have these emotional attachments to it. Right. So good for me, I guess, because I think it probably, I don't have a lot of that type of stuff from my past that I have to deal with. Mm-hmm. But so a couple things on this. One is you're being super vulnerable in doing this, just in general to anyone, which is important. And the podcast is kind of going to move that way. So thank you for being someone to share stories like this that are not easy to share. B would be the fact that, yes, this is family and I'm doing this in a public space, but we're talking right now and it's strange. But I think without something like this or sometime these vulnerable, important things that need to be said don't get said. And I think it's the good part about it is that within the last 3 years, I guess about 3 years, I think, since Grandpa passed away, that you've been able to begin to move forward in new ways. And I guess letter C, to bring it to 3 points of this, is so you're dealing with this childhood trauma that you've experienced your own thing, but I think more and more people are becoming aware that a lot of people have shit to deal with. Like, it's really bad. Yeah. And because of the way things are handled in certain generations, some people just don't talk about it. Yeah. Our generation, if we're in the same generation, technically, we're more willing and finding more ways to talk about it. But for a long time, you still couldn't get around it the way you've started to begun to, I think.
Well, it's because it's about that forgiveness piece and about that trust and being, talking about it in a setting such as this. I've shared it with some of my close friends, but never in a recording. And so, like, I think that would be very difficult for my dad to maybe listen to. And I don't want to cause him, he knows that I'm doing this and he has said that that's okay. But also for like grandma or dad to hear this might cause them more pain. And I don't want that. I don't want to cause them more pain. That's not the point of this. This is just my story. I think it is a story of redemption also. but I don't intend it to cause them more pain. But, I think growing up in, if you want to call it trauma, whatever it was, in an alcoholic environment, like, the hard part for me is those types of things. I have too many stories like that. And so I don't remember anything good. That is what happens when you grow up in an alcoholic or abusive household. Like, the only memories I have that I can pull from, they're all overshadowed by the bad memories. And I wish that I wish I could remember some good things. And that, I think, is really hard for me. And I think my dad doesn't remember doing those things. I really don't, because like when I would look into his eyes and see the blackness, like there was this one morning where he threw something and it hit a mirror and it busted the mirror. And the next morning he literally is like, "What happened in the mirror?" And we're all like, and he just like hung his head down and he shook his head like he knew it was him, but he didn't remember it happening. And so like that's what it did. It erased like all the good things I should have been able to remember from my childhood.
I think the finishing my thought from before, and that adds to it, is, so this is what you experienced through the version of him that came out when he was drinking a lot, and that erased any positivity from your childhood. Basically, it's either nothing good, or just like surviving every day and not having to deal with it.
So I'm sure there were good things. I don't remember them.
Yeah, everything else totally overshadows it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's maybe at some point, if this leads to he and I having a conversation, or he and you or something, I don't know what he went through in life, whether or not there was anything or not, whether it's him or anybody else. People that are often like the instigators in something, in negative interactions with other people, as far as I know, many, all perhaps, have other stuff. Just a cycle just pushes through generations and just leads to more and more bad. Not always, of course, but so you're carrying this forward, and hopefully through what you're raising of your daughters, that you've kind of broken that. But perhaps, but who knows how many generations prior in our side of the family, things like this were happening, and it kind of led up to you experiencing what you did. And maybe not. And maybe I'm just giving an excuse that isn't valid. But we sometimes just judging and assessing and pinpointing someone as being whatever we want to identify them as. Very well, there's things that don't justify it, but might help us to understand, okay, I can see how that could happen based on these things that led up to it.
I blame the alcohol. I think Grandpa, one time I had a conversation with him. I'd have conversations. We'd have meetings with my mom about leaving. 2:00 in the morning, like, should we leave? And how? Yes, we should leave. We would vote on it, but nothing would ever happen. Nothing would ever change. I told Grandpa, I've told people, I've told aunts who didn't really know what to make of it at the time. I told Grandpa one time, and he said, it's parents can hit their kids. And I said, yeah, Grandpa, they can for discipline, but not just because they're being drunk and stupid. And he was like, whoa, like he had never thought of it like that. You know what I mean? Like I think that would be a time where Grandpa would say, I was wrong. Like no one, the aunt that I told and confided in that this happened, she didn't know it was as bad as it was. I wrote a lot in high school as my way of processing this because I didn't know how to deal with it. And so I wrote a lot of papers. I had teachers come to me and offer to help me. I wish I would have let them. because now I feel like maybe if I had gotten this out to someone by explaining it better, all of this going to prison and everything that happened would have been avoided. All the bad things that led up to that could have been avoided. Maybe if I would have just been better at explaining how bad it really was. But of course, there would have been natural consequences to that. And I was too afraid. I mean, I did tell people, but I didn't push it.
And that, at least from my perspective, is the purpose that I see for you sharing this. Because if one person hears you explain this story and they have anything relatable
right.
that they can now begin to look at differently and move their life in a direction where they hadn't considered something the way that you explained your life transpiring to now. That's the purpose of having conversations like this in a public type of forum. And that's why it's important to be vulnerable and get to these deep things that, yes, you got it all together from the outside and you know better than that that's not the case. But if we just see a world of people that got it all together, but deep down we don't feel like we have it together and everybody else has it together, of course people are in some bad spaces. But to know, okay, I'm not the only one that had this crap happen to me.
Right.
And it doesn't make it good, but at least we can form some plan of attack to like make it better. And that's why I think it's important for people to share stories that make them super vulnerable. That's why I'm going to continue to do this when I talk to other people. And that's why I'm grateful that you're doing this for yourself, I guess for members of the family, possibly, if this is important for them to know what you've dealt with for all these years. And then for random person that sees you tell the story. There's so many reasons I think to do it.
Yeah. And I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me. I'm okay. I'm only sharing it because I want, if anyone else is in that situation, like, let the teacher help you. Keep telling people until someone responds. And I think we also live in a new time where if I were to go back today and tell that same aunt that this was happening, it would be completely different in how they would react. We are in a different time. So don't think you have to be quiet. It is okay. And you may be avoiding some really big consequences down the road. Like, I know none of what happened was my fault, but I do wish that someone would have listened, because then maybe all of the other bad stuff that happened didn't need to happen. And that's what if I could go back in time, that is a regret that I hold to this day. Like, somehow that was all my fault. I didn't do more.
I'll leave it at this for now, but I have episode 9 and episode 35 where I get kind of deep into my understanding of free will, or the lack of free will. And when we're talking about regret and looking back on things, from my perspective, the things, unfortunately, couldn't have happened any other way. Doesn't mean that I'm right, but the way that I look at my life, it allows me to not, I feel, and I haven't dealt with some of the stuff that you have, so I don't know if I'd respond the same way. If you know, unfortunately, your life transpired exactly the only way it could have, these thoughts of, I wish I could go back in time, or if I go back in time, hopefully there's other ways to get at this, to hopefully not let it.
Well, that's what I'm working on.
Yes.
Right.
And that's a part of so many layers to the process of overcoming these things.
Yeah, there are.
So again, thank you for sharing that. And as we were leading up to having this conversation, and it's up to you if you go forward. I don't even know what it is, but I felt like there was another potential vulnerable thing that you might share with me and the people I know show audience. And I don't know if there's a natural transition to that, or what you think, or if you want to at this point.
Yeah. So I think there's just so many things happening today that I think people just need to understand someone else's frame of reference on. And so I guess it kind of has to do with my childhood, and kind of not. But like, so growing up the way I did, I didn't really have a lot of confidence. I didn't value myself. And I made some bad choices and put myself in a bad relationship. And so I was raped by a boyfriend. And, I think, today, like, there's so much happening with people saying, like, abortion rights and just like, are you pro-choice? Are you pro-life? I think of this broken 17-year-old girl that I was when that happened to me. And so I am a pro-life person. But I do not have the right to tell anyone else that they should do one thing or the other. None of that. If your frame of reference is mine, where if you were scared that you would be faced with a decision like that, thank God that did not happen. I am so grateful that never happened. That choice I did not have to make. But please, if you're so devoutly believing one way or one side of this equation, think of someone else's frame of reference. So, I think, I hope one day that I don't regret saying that out loud to you, Curt. But it is again something I have to work on every day. I was told that was my fault because it was a boyfriend, right? And so that's a huge problem in this world. Like, the women who go through these types of things can sometimes ruin their lives and reputations to tell the truth and are judged for, well, that was your boyfriend. So what did you do? Or what were you wearing? Or how many drinks did you have at that party? And for me, every time I hear a story about that on the news, like, I kind of lose it. And when I hear people talking about pro-life and pro-choice, I just don't want anyone to think it's just that easy all the time. Because it's just not that easy all the time. And so please, like, just consider someone else's frame of reference in what your beliefs are and understand that those are valid and they're important. And I don't get to tell you what to do. I don't want that to ever have to be someone's choice. I really do not. I do not. But I don't get to be in charge of telling them that is what they should do. And so, boy, if you wanted a segment on being vulnerable, Curt, I guess you got it. But that's kind of part of who I am.
Thank you again for sharing that, Barbara. And again, I don't have, like, you're talking these things, and conceptually, I can see how hard they are. You have of course, you have these huge emotional connections to these parts of your life. And as I've stated in like episode 35, and just the people, I feel like I lack this middle range of emotion. Like I feel like maybe I should be like appearing to be or more sad when I don't know what I should, but I know it connects with me, and I understand that people have lived different lives than me, and I just want to know the world that I exist in and understand the perspectives of other people and try to, even though I can be confidently in my beliefs of things should be done this way or that way, try to understand why people believe or think or feel something different and kind of allow for everything if possible. And you stated right there that, like, it sounds like you would never have an abortion, but if you were put up to that decision, it would have been extremely hard for you not to. And maybe at that point in life, maybe somehow you would have, who knows? I don't know. Mm-hmm. But when someone else is put in that similar circumstance or anything comparable in any way, you're not going to tell them not to, even though you wouldn't do it and would prefer if that situation would never exist.
Precisely. So when I say, like, I am personally pro-life, but I'm very much pro-choice. because of that, because I'm never going to tell another woman what they need to do with their body. And unfortunately, I think when abortion is illegal, there can be back alley, options to kind of deal with how to handle that, that are far worse than getting some form of counseling or education before going through that. And so that's where I see myself on a lot of things. Like I see all these issues from both sides. And I think that we all just need to find more common ground. I've worked on doing that lately with people in my life, like that have differences of opinion than me. Everyone should, but we should all be able to talk about those differences and really to the extent that where can we find common ground and not be so divisive? My frame of reference is different than yours. Just please understand it.
And that's something that it took me a long time to really, if I'm good at it now, it took me a long time to get good at it. Just, okay, I want to know about this other person and try to see the world through their eyes instead of thinking that the world through my eyes is the right way. Yes, it's we live in this universe that feels like we are the center of it. But we're not. We are not. And other people are equally not in the center of it. And we should be aware of their existence and why they do the things they do. And just try to grow together to make everyone's life, first, less miserable for those people that have a really hard existence. And then in other cases, if it can actually become good, help people have a good life and enjoy their life. And
that would
have
be
joy
wonderful.
And fun and connection and engagement and conversation, whatever it is that people find valuable.
Right. And that it can be okay to be vulnerable.
It's important, probably.
I feel like this conversation will bring you and I even closer together as friends and cousins.
Of course it will. Like I feel like I could call you if I had something to talk about. And I feel like I need to share things with you now to kind of keep a balance. And that's how these things work. But also B, maybe I'm someone that you look to talk to more than when we just happen to see each other at the state fair or at whatever couple, 2, 3 family gatherings a year we might see.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is all good. And I always find that like the 1% of things I'm least willing to talk about historically, they impact the way I live my life, maybe 99% of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, those are round numbers. And that's the thing when I'm realizing with the vulnerability as I get more into this in future episodes, that 1% of stuff that you just don't want to talk about, you probably need to. As hard as it's going to be, it's probably either for yourself or for the people that might take it in, or both. It's going to be super important. And I want to work towards having a world where that's more common, and at least I can do this to the podcast. So I thank you for that, Barbara. And now I always finish my episode with a being wrong segment. I'm kind of identifying a way where my guest has totally changed their mind about something. So if you can look back in your life, what's something that you can now say you were wrong about because of the way you see the world now?
I don't like to be wrong.
No one does, but that's a good thing to practice to get into.
So I think I really, truly, and there will be friends from my past who can remember me saying this to them. I used to think there was more bad in the world than there was good. I truly believe that for most of my life. And I have worked hard to change that. I'm wrong about that. If we look for the bad, we will find it. But if we look for the good, we will find that too. So I'm choosing to look for the good. And because of that, I no longer believe I'm wrong. I think there is more good in this world than there is bad. I really do. And people deserve second chances when they've earned them.
And that approach in and of itself, you having that and more people having that approach. And I agree with you. I see so little bad. I know it exists. With the news will certainly push the bad news.
Yep.
But there's so much good happening, or at least neutral to slightly good happening that you don't hear about. And the good stuff, sometimes I think people are kind of ashamed to talk about. I think this might be mischaracterizing, but the good people in the world aren't going to brag about all the good things they do because they do it because it's the right thing to do.
Sure.
And I think the good doesn't get stated enough. It's out there, and I want more of it too. So anything you can do, I can do, we can do together to allow for, create more vision for good and positivity. I just think it kind of becomes contagious in time. It's not a quick thing, I think, for a lot of people, but the more potential good you see or experience, the more your life can move in that way. And the pendulum can swing. I'm sure there's people that see all negative, experience all negative, and just maybe the right type of positive thing in their life hopefully can get that pendulum swinging the other way. And there are stories of that. And I think we've kind of gotten into that somewhat through your stories today. And there's more to be done. We need to keep the positive approach.
Exactly. Yes. And that's all I have to say about it.
Okay. Well, then we'll leave it there. And I really hope that this is a moment in time we're capturing this that it proves
Barbara,
to be worth it to you to have done it.
This is Barbara taking a deep breath and having some hope for good. So thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, for taking the time and sharing these things that I know are hard for you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to People I Know Show. Check out the show notes. There's links there to all the People I Know Show social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I'm looking for feedback. Happy to hear what you might like. It's important for me to hear what you might not like or what you question. And if there's ever anything you want to know about one of my guests that maybe I didn't ask, I'd be curious to know what that is, and perhaps that'll inspire a future conversation. One of the best ways to reach me would be to send an email to me, Curt Carstensen, using the email address peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.